Yes, you need to remind yourself almost every day that you only have 5 weeks, right? It's not a lot of time. And as those of you who've taught in Smash before know, it's like that first week seems like really crazy, and then all of a sudden you're like, it's over. What just happened? Like, I mean, it's bizarre, but I never quite got used to it. I'd be like, all right, I'm running now. Done. What? I just got good at this. I just learned their names. Yeah, so yeah, how do you do this, right? And, I mean, these are huge. These are enormous. How do you address any of these in 5 weeks? Right?
I think that whole major global change, maybe just tone it down to like instead of saying that breaking down.
Yes, that would be wise. Yes, I think if we were to ask the greatest minds of our time, okay, you've got 5 weeks to come up with a solution to one of our, you're like, wow, what have you done? Yeah, so, yeah, I think that's a totally overwhelming. But it is interesting. Does it say solve a major global challenge? What does it say? Analyze. Do you think they could analyze a problem, a challenge? Yeah. Yeah, so I think if you break these down a little bit, sometimes they're a little bit more digestible. You don't have to have them create a solution, but you can have them analyze one. Do you have to cover all 4 of them in 5 weeks? No, definitely not. Yeah, no way, right? My suggestion would be to pick one, right? Pick one for you, not even just your students, but for you as a teacher. Pick one that you think you'd like to take a stab at, right? And that might be, use a computer simulation. And that computer simulation, could that be Excel? Use Google spreadsheet? Yeah, you could, right? You could set up a way of a set of formulas inside a spreadsheet so that when you change certain inputs into that spreadsheet, the values recalculated themselves and gave you a whole new graph, right? And you could ask the students to identify how that graph is changing based on the inputs of it, and that those inputs relate to some process. Maybe it's the amount of glucose in a solution, or maybe it's the amount of light that a particular bacterial, colony has access to. Whatever, obviously not a biologist. Whatever it might be, right?
I have a question, maybe it's more of a general question, but a lot of times I wonder how do you, I don't know how to say this. A lot of the problems are really political, I feel like. A lot of these global challenges, a lot of that stuff is just really, really political. Like, it's like, even if I made like this great product, or this great creating anything, like,
Yeah.
how do I think that's, I guess I don't want the students just thinking like in this bubble, like, oh, let's just make some clean water thing.
Right.
It's like, how do you actually put that into like, there's also, the biggest thing really is political stuff.
Well, I think it's a great question. My only answer to that, again, probably going to be annoying, is sometimes the best solution isn't about making a product, or even maybe it doesn't require technology. Maybe it's about rethinking the approach to begin with. So this came up in a conversation recently about the drought, and there was this problem that had been proposed to solve this using some form of technology, right? And someone, very smart person in the room, said, well, maybe we should just, why are we talking about this? Maybe we should just be rethinking how, why are we watering these particular plants to begin with? Right? Maybe that's the solution. Maybe we shouldn't be watering those things, rather than developing some sort of soil sensor that senses the soil and only waters them during the right? So sometimes, trying to get your students to think about, well, maybe the solution isn't about, maybe it doesn't use CAD, maybe it doesn't use computer programming, maybe it doesn't do any of this stuff, maybe it's about rethinking our place in the world. Right? So that might be the solution. I know that probably didn't answer your question. But I think it's a good question that's very open-ended in nature.
I have a thought here
Yeah.
to sort of reflect on this idea and how it might work in practice. And the question of breadth and depth comes up in my mind in the sense that you've strongly emphasized that they're learning how to learn, and that's the most important part. And so that suggests that there could be a breadth of topics. So we wouldn't necessarily try to move them through on the same topic. So it'd be like, okay, try to do the cup, and now try to do like plants and things like you said. But then they'll develop a certain motivation for something. So like they're interested in paper airplanes, or like airplanes, so they're going to use paper airplanes to model it. So they start getting pretty deep into paper airplanes. They don't want to back away from that in order to do like the sort of next level on it. So there's a trade-off, I think, somewhere between breadth and depth in this. And how do we find that balance, or is this the right question to ask?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question.
I mean, I guess I wanted to add on, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm concerned that if you follow one problem all the way through the end, it turns out somebody's already way, way ahead of you, and if you're emotionally invested at that point, it's really disheartening to see someone's like 20 years development, like, why did I bother? Right?
Yeah, that's the question of relevancy, right? It's like, how do you make, they are teenagers, right, in the classroom, and there is a likelihood that, they come up with an idea, right, that even yeah, someone already has something, it was like a team of engineers figured that one out a while ago. It's really cool, you just happen to not know about it, and I don't want to crush you by showing, yeah, but that's a better, So yeah, what do you do around that? And I think again, did any of you create a product today? No, but did you have fun? Did you learn something from that process? Was it enjoyable? Yeah, and I think that the students will tend to try to be focused on, they want to get to the end, like what you said, right? Is they'll want to get to that thing at the end. And even you guys I heard at the end, once I said, okay, you have 15 minutes, I stopped focusing and I wanted to just get to the end, right? And you have to sort of tell them, whoa, it's not that important to have something at the end. I want you to think about where you could, if you had 5 years to do this, where could you then take this, right? This is a prototype, a start of an idea. I don't want you at the end of the 5 weeks, we don't need this to be solved. You're just scratching the surface. But where would you then, and probably would be a good idea with your students to spend some time reflecting on where would you go from here? If you had the next 5 years to work on this problem, where would you go next? And that might be helpful for them. They don't need to solve the paper airplane problem, but you might want to hear from them, like, what would you do now that you've done this, right? And you now see that someone else has come up with a better solution than what you came up with. What would you might do with their solution? How would you improve on what they've done? And they had to go through those steps anyway, right? But it is a challenging one, I think. Again, time constraints and then their experience, right? You put those two together, and it's like, are they really going to come up with anything that's really legitimately authentic? And my answer would be no, not as a product, but as a recognition of where you could go from there. I think that's a more important place to build it towards. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's sort of, they reach a point where there is a victory, so it's not just sort of like, okay, let's just abandon it, but that victory is not sort of what, like, production.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Any other comments or questions about that? Cool. So again, I just wanted to, this is kind of a reiteration, we can kind of move through this, but just that EDC 3 is a capstone. We have brought in computer science as a part of that to align with the utilization of technology and those tools, and I think that that's been a really good change in the way that we've seen this course, is to bring in Because this course actually started off with science and math teachers, and we really tried to make it work with those two fields, but I think eventually the decision, and I think it was a good decision, was science and computer science. And I think the reason for that is because I think those computer scientists, I remember a quote was, let's bring science back into computer science. Because I think that if we look at computer science as a way of simulating and modeling physical reality, it's so rich, it's so incredibly rich to see computer science as a possibility for that. So that's an area of my interest as a teacher, is how do you not just provide students with computer simulations that they then interact with, but how do you get them maybe designing their own, and then using that as a way to test their knowledge of the physical realm. I think is a really rich way of doing it. Anyway, I think we can kind of pass this on pretty quickly. Similar stuff. Okay, so the last bullet point is feedback process will include design review from industry community representatives. So this is in the EDC 3 curriculum. At some point, they're going to have kind of a capstone project. And this will be kind of the culmination of everything they've learned over 3 years. And so the reason why I think it really wanted to kind of drive this point home is that what you're doing with the EDC 2 curriculum is just, again, a pathway towards EDC 3. We're not expecting them to come up with this community solution every single year, right? So that idea, right, that you only have 5 weeks, and how do we get them to really think about a community-based solution? Remember that you're on a pathway with those students, that you don't have to come up with that in year 1, or even in year 2, right? If you're building, though, maybe hinting at it, that this is something that they'll be working on in year 3, and maybe be even thinking about it over the year, right? So as they leave this summer, challenge them to be like, all right, just remember, in year 3, we're going to be asking you to put some of this stuff together to be thinking about a community problem that you could solve. So you should be thinking about that. What would that be as you go back to your own high school and your own home life? And I mean, I would encourage Smash to, send out updates. Hope you're thinking about, that year 3 capstone project. Think about those things. I think that would be useful. All right, so EDC 2. Those of you who are doing that, we are looking at collaborative learning and use of digital online tools. We're looking at creativity and understanding technology and engineering. 3D modeling is kind of the core central focus of it. But again, a piece of paper and a pen, you can 3D model on paper and pen. Generally nowadays, because computers are so handy and the fact that you can actually swivel this thing around and turn it around and do all sorts of cool stuff with it, and kids love it, and that's what they use in the actual design process now. And what's really cool is that most of these tools now, so many of them are free, right? I mean, I remember when I was working on an engineering project back in grad school, I was working with AutoCAD, 2-dimensional drawings, and this program costs like thousands of dollars, right? And now you can just go online, download software that's almost professional grade for free. And lots of students are already doing it, and they have no relationship that it's even an engineering process, right? It's like, yeah, it's really cool, great stuff. Right? So that's where we want to get them seeing that, is it's not just for engineers. 3D CAD is not just for engineers anymore. So exposure to the idea that one can model nearly anything in a virtual world, that it does accelerate the STEM learning cycle. And this is something I put in there. One of the things I've found, especially with rapid fabrication devices like 3D printing, is that the learning cycle is so rapid, because now you create something, you create it virtually, have it printed out, see that it's not working, or you see that now that it's in your hands physically, that you want it to be this corner needs to be slightly rounded or whatever, and then you just send it back to the printer and reprint it out. And that can happen within a classroom in a single day. It's amazing. And that was never the case. Before it was like, oh, I gotta redesign this, okay. Now I gotta send it to the machine shop, the machine shop's gotta retool the instrument, and now it's gonna take 2 weeks to get that back and see if I've actually made any progress on it. So this also accelerates the learning process. So I don't know what does each site have a 3D printer?
Yeah, but this one will go between Berkeley and Stanford, so probably 3 weeks Berkeley, 3 weeks Stanford.
So that's another area where, just as you're telling the students, hey, learn 3D CAD, I think it would be a very powerful experience to be like, hey, I got this really cool tool here. I don't know how it works. You guys know it's a 3D printer, right? You guys know what those do, right? Now, the kids are just going to be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? They have a 3D printer in the room right now? Yeah, but you better learn how to use it because I don't know how to use it. So how would you learn that? And just ask them, how are we going to learn to use this? And, YouTube videos, internet, maybe someone in the room is like, oh, we have one of those at our school. I've seen it used before. So, haven't any of you used 3D printing before? 3D printers? Yeah. They have they're really fun. They also, they're really buggy for sure. So you'll have fun. All right. And then EDC 1 is primarily around what I call physical computing, which is really just about, you've got this device that does things, and it can communicate if you wanted to, but physically through means of lighting up lights and turning servos and taking an input too, like temperature, light, and things like that. And so much of new technology is around physical computers. You all carry one in your pocket. And so much of what we now do and students interact with, right, is this physical computer that takes input and communicates with us. And so that was the idea behind EDC1 is we want to demystify that. We want them to see that, hey, this Arduino, a version of it, in a way, is right there in the palm of your hand, right? It's a different kind, but it does similar things, right? It's got an accelerometer in it. It's got a light sensor. It's got a way of communicating with the world in various different ways. It vibrates, so it's got actually a little electromagnet in there. All these different things that it's just a device that senses and communicates with the world. And so that's why we encourage the Arduinos to be a part of the EDC1, is again to sort of demystify that. And I think that's empowering, right? If anyone has an old phone, it's always really cool to bring in an old phone, open it up, and be like, do you notice it's not that different, right? Microelectronics are a little bit smaller, there might be a little more going on in there, it might be a little more complex, but that's what's going on. All right. So this is where we're going to have a discussion around the rubric analysis, but I'm going to postpone that. You guys are going to have to, it's already 4:21. My suggestion to you would be to really dig deep into these rubrics, because that's where the majority of your understanding will really come in to how to kind of push the students in the directions that you want them to. With regards to, the rubrics are essentially frameworks for how to evaluate the work that the students are doing in the class. Because they need your feedback, right? They need to know, am I on the right track here in terms of the way that I'm orienting myself in these particular fields? And these rubrics will orient them. But you're the expert in evaluating their performance on those rubrics. And so they're I think, very well done. And they are fairly general. They're not, you need to know how to do this on the Arduino, or you need to know how to do this with your CAD software. It's not like that at all. So have you had a chance to take it? Those were sent out, right? The EDC curriculum?
The PDF of the first 8, yeah.
Okay, cool. So in there, and so I don't know if this is going to be helpful to you at this point. It might be, but our idea was to have you get into your teaching teams right now that are at your sites and just open up those rubrics and take a look at them. Could we do that for about 10 minutes, would that be all right? Cool, let's do that. EDC curriculum website. From there, what you'll find is that on the sidebar, you have EDC 1, EDC 2, and then up at the top here, there is a link to a document. And that document is essentially what's on the website. But if you also just scroll down, you'll see project rubric. Okay? And that's the rubric we're talking about. Is these are the evaluation rubrics that you will be expected to use to evaluate student performance on all 3 projects in each course. And there are 3 projects for each course, and each one is a little bit longer and a little bit wider in scope and a little more challenging as they go on. But this rubric is used in each case. Okay? So I think what would be really important is to, with your partner, skim it, scan it, find areas that you might not feel you understand, or you might have questions about it, or you feel it might be appropriate to discuss with your partners, because you're all going to be using this tool together. So it's probably pretty important that you all have a collective understanding about how to use it. In the interest of time, it is now 4:40,
I think that's
and I know that you probably spend another 45 minutes just digging through this curriculum and having a chance to collaborate with your team. And I want to be obviously I want to respect that desire because you guys want to teach in the courses. I just want to quickly have an open conversation. Are there any questions about the rubrics at all that you need answered by me?
I just want to say I'm excited about that rubric, it's really comprehensive, and it looks like all the things I was trying to focus on last year, with the rubric.
Okay, good.
I'm impressed.
Good, right on. Yeah, we tried to clean it up. And just to be clear, Dip did about 95% of the work, I'm about 5%. Okay. Yeah, so meaning the good parts are mine. You can blame him for it.
Only 5% is good.
Well, yeah. So I essentially acted as a advisory role. You would kind of shoot things and be like, "What do you think of this?" Yeah. Okay, great. So, but I have read through the rubric. So sometimes like questions will come up about scheduling and something like that. I wish I had the answers about that. I just don't. I'm not that informed about it. Okay, great. Yeah.
We just had a more detailed question about the second year. Just having draw 3D images. I think that's hard for me. I can't draw.
It is hard. Yeah. Yeah, we discussed that, and we discussed is this building in perspective and all of these types of things, and feel free to alter it a bit, right? Feel free to not if you feel that that's not being useful to your students, right? If it's not a useful task, there's flexibility here, right? I mean, we want to make sure that you understand that we respect you as educators, and you bring expertise to the table. And if you see that something's not working for you, then change it. That's okay. And then give us that feedback, right? Of like, why did you do it? Just be intentional. And so, I was trying to get them to do this. It wasn't working very well, so I had a backup plan. So that's one of the things. Reading through it and being like, all right, I anticipate this is going to be hard, and I anticipate that there's going to be issues. So the question I would then have for you is, what's going to be your backup plan for that particular thing? And if you don't have one, you'd like us to give you some ideas of how that might be. Definitely, open that up for a discussion between Vip and myself and the other folks who have to teach that curriculum. But it is a debate that we had about, you're going to have students who are really, they're good artists, right? And they're going to be like, 3D drawing, no problem, right? And other people are going to be like, I can draw a stick figure. Like, I don't know, what are you talking about, right? So how might you, because I think developing that skill though on a two-dimensional surface can be useful to them, right? So how would you go about addressing that?
Well, one thing that he said was just have different perspectives of the object and top bottom and stuff.
Yes. Okay, cool, excellent. So one thing I've seen someone do before is just give someone a cutout of a cube, right, but the flat pattern, right, and then construct the cube, right, and then on each face of the cube, take an object and draw what you see, right, of that object, right, and then move around that object, draw it on the other side of the cube, right, and then unfold that flat pattern of the cube, right, and see just, you've represented it three-dimensionally, but in various different types of two-dimensional representations, right? I mean, there's all ways of different ways of doing it, where essentially you're just drawing flat geometric shapes, right? And then seeing how would you connect all this together into a single drawing, right? And whether they do it, successfully, just getting their brain to think of in those ways, right? I think could be really handy. Maybe it doesn't have to be a complex shape. Just start with a cube. How would you draw a cube?
I got one more question too. In terms of detail, should they have measurements and things like that?
So, the engineers in the room will say yes. And you have to have tolerances, and you have to, and I would say maybe it would be useful for certain applications. Maybe it's just, I think a more interesting question would be, if you don't, what could be some of the problems with that, right? If you have a student who gives you a drawing that has no measurements on it, one question would be, all right,
How big is this?
yeah, or hand it to another student and be like, hey, go ahead and make this, right? And ask them, what would be the challenges of making this object? Well, I don't know, how big is it, right? Is it a sugar cube, or is it a building, right? And that again brings up a conversation you can have with the students about the importance of information, right? And what kind of information might one need to communicate. And so then that forms into a new conversation about communication and information, as opposed to